Season 4, Episode 12. Warning, this episode discusses workplace injury. Never smile at a crocodile, chimes Alan. This episode speaks on working with critters. The team explores a case of two soldiers attacked by a crocodile in Far North Queensland. The boys start chest-thumping the machismo argument that the salty crocodile of Australia is bigger and tougher than the American alligator counterpart. The debate on work, tourism and the intersection of animals that bite. What is just good lawyering versus rational judgments? Sara demands answers. Alan returns to the case discussed in Season 2, Episode 7, the Nightstalker Fright Night case. If you haven't listened to that, you really should jump back and listen to that first. And Sara explains real-world creative design strategies that leverages human nature to inform design strategy on toileting habits. Enjoy this curious episode. Hello and welcome to the Why Work podcast series. You are listening to Trajce, Sara Pizzell and Alan Girl. Have you heard of the old adage, never work with children and never work with animals?
And never smile at a crocodile.
And never smile at a crocodile.
Well, sounds like a song.
Can we talk about, I know last season we talked a lot about recreational activities and game shows and other things on reality TV. That's all work. Let's look at animals and working with animals or working around animals.
Yeah, there's a surprisingly large number of cases involving animals. Mm-hmm. And the latest to hit the media, and I should say this is just in the media, so no charges have been established yet or proven. But we just last month, saw in the media that the Department of Defence has been charged because two soldiers were attacked by a crocodile. That's way up in Far North Queensland, 600 kilometres north of Cairns. And they'd been permitted to take out a Zodiac to go fishing. And once they'd pulled up in the Zodiac, they jumped in the water for a swim, which I find remarkable that any Australian would make the mistake of jumping into the waters that far north of Cairns.
Tourists usually.
But it happens. You
it
hear
does,
about
it does happen,
often,
but it's often tourists,
yeah.
People who are not familiar with our...
Some locals too, up in Far North Queensland.
Yeah, locals too.
They get a bit
when the
complacent.
locals go in, they go in with the dog, and the dog becomes the target, and so they're safer. But
the things you learn on this show.
Yeah, but you don't want to be taken by a crocodile, and so they got attacked by a crocodile, and now it's Comcare has charged Department of Defence with offences under the Act. Apart from just the curiosity of it, it's interesting too because they weren't working at the time. They were off fishing at the time.
So it's work related because they were using a work vehicle.
A Zodiac, yes.
Yep. So Works obviously said you can borrow our boat. So they've said, listen, we're going fishing. It's the weekend.
And it was still treated as a work-related incident?
Apparently, according to the media, the charge is for failing to train the workers.
Okay, so failing to train the workers when they're out on their own time, and I just got to reflect for a moment. You're also away from home, traveling in a hotel room, sharing a room, and you don't get coverage?
I know.
So excuse me, for the layman outside of the legal world, that to me looks like either good lawyering or bad lawyering here versus the real issue at hand.
The case isn't finalised yet, and I guess it all depends upon whether the Department of Defence is going to fight it. But it is a curious case.
But either way, there's going to be some type of compensation. So let's move the prosecutorial aspect aside, the charges being laid. There'll be some type of private rights consideration here.
They weren't working at the time.
Yeah, they weren't.
This is on their off time.
It wasn't related to their duties.
No. I wonder if there's any action, civil action going ahead with something or...
there could be a civil action. It looks as though that there's definitely the potential for that.
That's what I mean about the compensation.
But they're still going to have the same problem. That they were not engaged in a work activity.
No. And
Department of Defence hasn't placed them in a position of vulnerability. All Department of Defence did was lend them the Zodiac.
So apparently the accusation is that they lacked in providing a detailed safety briefing about the risk of crocodile attack when entering the water.
If they're taking the Zodiac, you're saying?
No, they jumped off the Zodiac into the water to have a swim.
Yeah, which was
really silly.
Looking at that liability issues because the workplace loaned them this boat, right? And therefore, and didn't explain the risks associated with where they're traveling. Therefore, they're responsible. It's a bit like, the gas tanks, compressed gas. When a customer comes to collect it, you drive away, and they're still saying that the person who was selling that gas was responsible.
Yeah, well,
for that education, hazard education, right? So this is what I think I'm hearing you say is because the boat was used, that they're responsible for that hazard education. It's on their own time.
I'm just reading out what's in the media.
Yeah,
It's
right.
saying fail to maintain the good old safe system of work, which could mean anything. It could mean the boat. It could mean lack of training about crocodile-infested waters. But one thing we do know, this isn't the first work-related crocodile case. I'm just reflecting.
We see them every year.
I did one. I remember one, and it was the croc attack at Childers Reptile Park. Snakes and reptiles. Zoo owner in Brisbane hospital after mauling in front of visitors. In that case, that person who was injured, who also was the PCBU, thought it...
A person conducting a business or
Yes.
undertaking for all our overseas listeners. Yep.
If I remember the facts correctly, he thought it'd be a good idea to place an akubra hat
on top of the crocodile's head, mate.
on the head. Or when you do,
All right.
where
So
else
that's
would
the
you put a hat?
iconic Aussie hat, right?
So,
okay.
and what's happened there is it's presumed the reptile took a dislike to the akubra hat because the reptile snapped and grabbed him and commenced the roll. And at this stage, his workers could find anything they could to distract the crocodile and whacking it over the head with a stick to release
his jaw clamp of his arm.
Yes, it wasn't. Luckily for this fellow, it wasn't a full clamp. It was still enough to cause amputation injuries, but he's managed to pry himself out, pull his hand out.
Very lucky.
Yeah, but nevertheless, it was a workplace, and what struck me was that this construct, this idea of a workplace, extends just the four walls of the factory or the office.
Work from anywhere.
Yep, and this is why I'm thinking about the Zodiac boat and the soldiers. Could the training issue be...
Argue that if the soldiers haven't been trained and they're performing their duties in far northern Queensland,
Yes.
they should have been trained, and that the attack of the crocodile, whilst not connected with their work, is just demonstrative of the risk.
So the idea of know or ought to have known.
Yeah. And look, Sarah does raise a good point in that we have an international audience, and for our international audience, crocodiles are huge reptiles that are very dangerous.
They're much bigger than
Salties,
alligators.
mate. Saltwater.
Yeah, so you've obviously seen an alligator or two in your time in the US.
Because, they walk across the street all the time.
They do, apparently, in Florida, so I've heard.
They keep them as pets, don't they?
So
They must be much more placid.
They're more initial nibblers rather than complete, sort of big
Biters, yeah.
biters.
A nibbler. I love it.
But I look at an alligator and I think, yeah, that's pretty dangerous. But then you look at a crocodile and go, that's just positively prehistoric and like dinosaur.
So we're saying to all our American listeners, your alligators aren't as tough as our
That's what we're
something
saying.
that sounds like a competition.
Yeah, well, I'd like to see a fight, an arm wrestle between a crocodile and an alligator. And I bet you
who rolls better.
I bet you the croc mate would roll better.
I think the croc wins on that
think the
one.
croc wins.
Have you seen how wide their jaw is too? How
Big.
strong, my
They're strong.
gosh.
So the crocodile and the thing
is it wrong for me to admit that I have had my son, in cairns, inside there's this...
That's cairns for our Australian listeners.
Can I just caution you? I think you're about to admit to an offence.
It was
paid
time.
for.
It was off time, man. The zip lines and right over the crocodile's head. Whee!
Wow.
You fly over a crocodile
That's
in
insane.
Cairns.
That's not Sarah's fault. I mean, if the zip line's available
So
for
is
that.
there a cage
It's
above
a
the
ride.
croc so
Nope.
that if you drop...
It must be a little...
Oh, no, they have a harness.
There's a harness for you, but
But
not
what
a
if the line
cage over
broke?
the crocodile.
But what's if the line broke?
And so while I was there, one lady
my
in
goodness.
in front of my son, she flies down and hangs halfway, dangling above this crocodile. She got stuck on the zip line.
Oh, no.
Right?
Oh,
and I'm
no.
like, guys, there's a lady just over there. And I've seen crocodile videos. I've seen them jump
Yeah.
their
Yeah, they can
tails
leap out of
like
the
a
water,
kangaroo's tail. They use that to propel themselves up and vertical.
See, that's scary.
And the
That's very
staff
scary.
ran and came and helped
How do you
her.
explain that?
It's a
And
Cairns
could you
thing.
imagine there and your little legs going, I think I can, like a cartoon, right?
Yeah, but people in F&Q,
F&Q.
Far North Queensland, they do things in a really sort of wow out there. All the white water rafting, the rapid river.
I know. I know.
Not the actual ride.
The true adventurers.
Yes, right. I recall, and I think this one may have gone to inquest about the German or backpacker or German tourist who was actually a very good swimmer, an accomplished swimmer for her local swim team in Germany, thought she'd cross the river, and despite people being cautioned and warned against these things, often tourists think, oh, look, how hard can this be? Or how dangerous can swimming around? I mean, surely a crocodile won't come. They become quite, relaxed. Well, one of the cases I remember was an Austrian doctor and his fiancée, I think at the time. They, of course, misjudged the trip out far in the desert, and they'd run out of, I think, petrol. He said he's going to look for help. And, of course, they're from Austria. It would be presumed you walk nearby a village and find someone, I suppose. But of course, it's the Australian desert, and he died, unfortunately, because of that gross miscalculation of the Australian environmental conditions. So tourists really have no idea about just how big and dangerous
the realities of the outdoor, the natural world in Australia. And I'm talking about the entertainment value, right? Where, you know how your risk calculation is so different because you're doing something for a thrill as opposed to a workplace. Like you can have a health and safety manager who spends the weekend doing motorcycle stunt rides or something, whatever that is, right? In Las Vegas, I remember the fantastic and fun water slides that are tubular underwater around sharks. So sharks are swimming around you as you're like, whee, riding through this. It's like a see-through visibility, right? So can those things break? Can they compress? Can something happen? Of course it. There's not probable, but could. Yeah,
and that's the thing, and I guess that's the risk that's taken as to how individuals rationalise what is dangerous.
And at workplace, you want all these down protections, but what do you do outside of work, right?
And yet it still work though. That's the thing. It still work for somebody who is running the zip line.
In the military, it's the person running the zip line or maintaining animals, like you've heard about zookeepers that get bitten or maimed or whatever. Beautiful, cute tigers sometimes, or whatever it is.
They have bad days.
They have bad days. That's right.
So it's that.
And in the military now, are they working or not working? It'd be interesting to see what's going to happen in this case.
Oh, look, if I was looking after the Department of Defence, you'd have to seriously think about contesting it. And I'd be very surprised if the Department of Defence isn't giving information to their soldiers about crocodiles and other
wildlife in wild
issues.
Australia.
Snakes.
And then the real issue is once you have given that information, and then it'd be interesting to see, for example, that information was provided, or indeed you don't even need to provide training. Common sense would prevail. I mean, however, you wonder then if they've gone off on a frolic and then something's happened. It is a work health and safety prosecution. You're off the clock, so you're a soldier off the clock. You're using a work vehicle, fine.
Zodiac,
And it's a bit like when people get company cars, they're allowed to drive on the weekend or whatever. So, but that's a contractual arrangement. But now to be somehow potentially responsible for a croc attack, that is a bit mind-blowing, actually, Alan. The more I think about it, now it wasn't a drill, it wasn't a work-related event.
No,
where they're training to be, amphibious soldiers or whatever.
Amphibious soldiers.
You know what I mean?
I just pictured them growing reptile skin,
Oh, Man from Atlantis. Remember that show? God, that was a great show. I love that show, Man from Atlantis. Used to work out by
webbing hands.
Yeah, remember
right.
that? Do you remember
Little
that
toes?
Show?
No.
Man from Atlantis. Ellen, do you remember that?
My vintage Aquaman.
Yeah, well, see, for us growing up, we had...
For some consultancy work, and the guys are saying, oh, mate, you got to watch the croc behind you. And I'm like, ha, yeah. And they're like, no, really? And I just thought it was a joke, and I'm walking backwards, and right behind me, but it was caged, was this big-ass crocodile that they were relocating.
Right, okay, yeah.
I'm like standing right in front of this thing who's just, quietly observing and watching.
They're like that.
Yes, waiting for the right opportunity if I put my ankle too close to that fence.
Yeah, and you're saying at Far North Queensland, I remember a holiday in Port Douglas, and, you've got, when you go to the beach, and, you're from the sunny coast, you've got the signs that say, swim between the red flag, jellyfish are out. Well, there was that, swim between the red flags, jellyfish are out. Oh, a crocodile's been spotted. So I'm thinking, this is like a popular particular beach.
Yeah.
And they've seen possible crocodile sighting.
Yeah. And does the crocodile and the jellyfish, do they know to swim away from those flags?
That's right. Exactly. So that's what they never work with children or animals. It's amazing. But, well, there you go. So that we'll watch that one with, no pun intended, bated breath. And we'll see.
Yeah, will be interesting.
Yes, and we'll see how things pan out. Back into position. All right.
Thanks.
I can get some vitamin D. All right, Alan.
Are we recording?
What's happening? Let's get started, mate. Who's going to start this? You're going to start this.
All right, let's... There was a case that we've spoken about, and it's since been appealed to the High Court. And so I think we should discuss what happened in the High Court. So they've gone all the way to the top in this case. And it was the case where on the Daydream Island Resort, there were two employees. One was the supervisor of the other. They'd both spent a night drinking, and the supervisor goes back to his room first, falls asleep. The other worker, the other employee, comes back to the room later, a couple of hours later, very early in the morning, and the junior worker ends up vomiting in the bathroom and then comes out and urinates in the mouth of the supervisor, and the supervisor brought an action for damages, which ended up crystallising being an action for damages against the employer on the basis the employer was vicariously liable for the action. The High Court has decided in favour of the employer, and so the action has failed by the recipient of the urine. And I have to say...
The recipient of the urine. That's, oh my gosh.
Now, hold on, Sarah. Think about this. I have to say I'm with the High Court because...
Aim and shoot while you're sleepwalking?
I've got two sons. This guy was drunk. He came back. There's no way he's going to hit a target of 5 to 10 centimetres. That's just not possible.
I have no idea. The fact that you've descended into the facts, into such detail. But hang on.
This was season 2, right? This was season 2. Yeah. We talked about this, yes.
Hang on. It failed. So why? Just too remote?
The vicarious argument failed, and the reason why the vicarious argument failed was because there wasn't a connection between the events that happened in that moment in time and the employment relationship.
Even though, let me just get this straight, because even though the employer had these two people sleeping in the same room, right? Which we've already discussed, that I hear people on the road complaining all the time. I can't sleep properly. The neighbor snores. Why should I have to lose some dignity in sharing a room that I would not normally choose to do because I'm conducting work? It's in the course of my duties. So that concerns me.
Yeah, the High Court did talk about that, and they compared with another case where there had been a finding in favour of the plaintiff in that case, and they said there wasn't a particular vulnerability here. You had two workers who were basically very similar in their levels of seniority. There was no evidence that the supervisor was at risk by the actions of the more junior worker.
Must protect workers even against improbable situations that cause significant harm. And that's why I always am concerned about only using risk-based language, because many times there are improbable circumstances and you need to design robust systems so that the worst possible thing doesn't happen also.
And this was the worst.
And this would be pretty damn terrible.
This is all boundaries, and so employers do have to anticipate the improbable, but if it becomes so improbable that you can't anticipate it, then an employer has a defence.
And that's what the court pretty much has said this by saying
there was no evidence.
All right, but so you have to get that specific in saying we should have planned for somebody sleepwalking, walking across to that bed and aiming in a mouth that was
5 to 10 centimetres wide.
5 to 10 centimetres wide, but urinating, shall we say, and crystallizing this idea and urinating. Shall I use that proper language you're using?
Yes.
So, but wait a minute. Now,
I regret saying crystallising.
I like that word.
I'm going to keep using that.
Relieved.
Relieved himself. That's right. So, couldn't it just be more generic? By staying in the same room, something could happen with one person affecting your sleep and causing harm broadly. And it just so happened to be urinating and crystallizing this idea. Okay.
And remember, this went all the way to the High Court. So at one point that they found for the plaintiff. So it's not like these things are easily resolved. These are vexed issues. Remember the motel case?
But I get a bit passionately, you know, I want to defend that guy that got pissed on.
It's very easy to feel sympathetic for the recipient.
So Sarah, how would you design that to avoid that occurring?
Well, I've got to just tell you, I'm going to tell you a tangent though, right? This is hilarious. So I use this a lot in design presentations about work design. When you're trying to problem solve and you need creativity, etc. Schiphol Airport, right, Amsterdam, they had a problem with the cleanliness or lack thereof of the men's urinals, right? And they had complaints from the cleaning staff, of course. The management of the cleaning staff are usually contracted to airports.
These are serious hygiene issues.
Serious hygiene issues, right? Toxic waste here. So they didn't have budget, so they've got the constraints, and maybe they couldn't get the right staff and retain them long enough because it's not necessarily a desirable job, right? And then you have passengers who complain, and so you've got finance, you've got multiple people in a system who need a resolution. So instead of always going just block by block, brick by brick with the conventional thinking, they said, all right, what can we do that's a little bit different, and engage some of those cleaning staff. So you know what they did? In one toilet bowl, they just tested it out. They etched in a cockroach, right? Now, this didn't work.
To aim at.
Iterative design. It didn't work, right?
It didn't work.
It made more of a mess, but people tried to miss the cockroach. So what do? Plan 2?
Chewing gum?
No, they etched in a little fly. This is something that people are not scared of, that want to, the guys want to, you know, for lack of better words, so they aim, fire, hit the fly, so much less spoilage and waste, and everything went into the urinal as planned, as designated, as designed by that urinal bowl. They've got flies etched into the urinals.
Have a fluoro light, you know, like
aim,
a circular
target.
fluoro, and a big red arrow saying aim here.
And then you have to win something. You know, like when you spray gun those little duckies. So if you win something,
two things.
If you hit the
get
fly,
10 points.
you get
So two things from this side diversion, this vignette. One was you two were very excited about that story, but secondly, of
We've
course,
got boys. You've got a boy.
yes,
Infant. I better not
but
tell
here's
this
the
story.
thing. It was an interesting diversion. You guys got right into it, but more importantly, only in Amsterdam could this experiment occur.
But
No other jurisdiction.
It's such a great example of don't lose creativity and
Deduct.
and first of all, explain the problems from many people's point of view who are involved in that system, and write problem-based design statements, which are things like, as a cleaner, I want, you know, less waste. I want men to comply with using the bowl as it was intended. And as a manager, I want a cost-efficient way to solve this problem without hiring more staff who are likely not going to stay on training.
So Sarah, this worked.
It worked.
And Trajce was our boys when they really needed coaching. We used to put a piece of Nutrigrain in the bowl.
Oh, seriously? So they aim and fire.
Here's the thing.
Glitter. You've got a boy too. They put glitter.
No, none of this happened.
Glitter in the water, and you
It
aim.
probably did, and you just don't know about it.
Well, let's just say I wouldn't want to be that fly on the wall.
Okay.
Boom.
But
now,
back
look,
to design for this situation.
design.
First of all,
Now,
don't have
okay,
adult workers sharing a room.
I'm with
Full
you.
stop.
Alan?
And there is an obligation here to consider
the High
this
Court has
strategy.
ruled it's law.
Yeah, but no, it's law. But let's move on to design now. My hands up. I remember in the last episode, I said no to room sharing.
No room
Okay,
sharing.
worst case scenario, this thing could happen.
Put it this way.
Worst case scenario, snoring.
Cost an absolute bomb to get this case all the way to the High Court.
Yes.
And so everyone will have lost on legal fees.
Correct.
And
It's
a
a
whole lot of
loss all
distress.
around.
Enormous distress. And for both parties,
It's
the
stressful.
urinator and the urinatee, their names
Urinatee.
are all over the case. So,
I know.
you know,
But here's the thing. So getting back
No.
to something more practical and fundamental, Sarah, I'm with you, the one person room.
One person per room.
Alan? What would you do to redesign this? Sarah doesn't monopolise design, you know. Just like we don't,
no.
She's the expert.
no, just like we don't monopolise the law, and we shouldn't. A lot of lawyers think they are the monopolists. They are not, thanks to Osley.
No, and design is a partnership, as I said. It's from many people's point of view that contribute.
What
right?
would you do, Alan? And because I know you want to give that sort of clinical top-down. What would you do?
That if you can achieve a one person per room, that would be an excellent outcome.
And if you can't?
We wanted to talk about consultation, and this is the very sort of thing you should have consultation about.
Sarah, if we can't do the one person, budget's too tight for the one person, how would you redesign? I mean, easy solution, open checkbook, one person per room.
One person per room.
We haven't got the budget for that, Sarah.
Well,
Please fix this.
maybe we can't do the work then.
No, Sarah, we have to do the work. The contract's writing. No one's going to get Christmas bonus. It's got to be done.
I'm just saying. So what you're telling me now is no matter the cost to somebody's health and well-being, we're getting that work done, and that is what I'm challenging. Right? It is not at any point.
No, I've got a better idea. We won't put Alan and Trajce in the room because anything could happen there.
Right.
So what we'll do is we'll work out.
We start sending emojis.
And Alan has a habit of emojis of red wine and beer.
How are the rooms even assigned? All right. Okay. So I'm going to go with you, even though I don't agree with this. I have the capacity to kind of. All right. I'm going to move like water around this.
We need 2 in a room, Sarah. This gig has got to happen. 2 in a room.
Okay.
It's a small town.
How are the assignments made? Were people allowed to, choose your bestie? Now, this also brings up to this point. Imagine, quote unquote, signing a waiver saying, I'm agreeing to share this room with, Vanessa and
Sarah and Vanessa.
You've told us before, Alan, that doesn't matter. Even if I signed a consent form or a waiver, that won't hold up, right?
Well, it could work against the employer because it
there's no way. No, you're all employees.
Yes, that's right. But and talk about that assignment of.
I think it's hugely problematic having 2 people in a room.
I do too.
But let's just say, it's happening as we speak. No, we have to. We've got to be pragmatic.
They squashed the plaintiff's claim on being affected by somebody sleepwalking and urinating in their mouth while they were asked to share a room. Is the argument that they weren't asked and they chose to share a room?
I think it happens all the time. Of course, that 2 people choose to share a room, but that's because they know each other and they're comfortable.
Look, sometimes in sales, right? They give you a per diem, and the guys or gals might choose to save on their per diem wages, so they get per diem flat rate no matter what. They go find their own room, right?
Yeah, flight
and then
staff.
they choose to share a room so they can save some money.
Sharing accommodation to share.
So then, where's that responsibility that
Yeah, well, best case scenario, one room, fine. But let's just say that the situation was 2 had to be in a room, and it wasn't like a per diem situation to save money, but rather it was the just essentially it was the budget. You're saying that's risky?
No, big time.
Big time, Alan. You would say you would caveat, you would warn your client against that type of policy.
Well, you've got to be pragmatic, but yes, I feel uncomfortable.
And there's let me give you some of the, platinum standards, a vision to aspire to. A mining camp in WA has achieved their well building accreditation at a high level for their camps. So, where you stay overnight when you're like on a FIFO schedule and the resources and the facilities. So you're not feeling like you're missing out on the way that health is supported in a nice environment when you're out at a mine site, when you have to go back and sleep or go to the cafeteria or cafe. It's not just some rusty old donger in the back, right? That's been forgotten about in a very thin mattress where you hardly sleep when you're working long hours anyway. So there are some aspirations to look at the well building standards where things like your airflow, your the lighting, the acoustics have been well managed, the chance for exercise, go through 10 design concepts with a well building standard, at what's considered to be usually the last thought accommodation of some of those camps. So that's now changing. The idea is changing among organizations that we need to actually construct health through the built environment. Right? And then on the other hand, you have, we'll put 2 in a room, mate. Sorry, budget, or maybe it's a constraint of actual availability of rooms, right?
That's what
Let
I was
me use
getting
this.
to.
Let's go there, right?
Country town. It's a big job. They're running a show, and you've got all the carnival people putting stuff together. There's they're flying them in.
So can you get camper vans up then? Can you get things? Can you get other alternatives? If there's not adequate hotel accommodation, bring camper vans. Do something. Build that into the costing. That's the cost of doing business.
So the key is consultation. Getting back to what you're saying, Alan, you got to have that conversation, and then through that conversation, you may get a workable outcome solution.
And I think we need to talk a little bit about this word consultation and how you guys interpret this.
You've been listening to Trajce, Sara and Alan, and if you've really enjoyed this show, share this with a friend. Submit your 5-star rating on your favourite podcast streaming service. Keep listening and send in your stories. You can email us at hello@ywork.com.au, and of course sign in to our newsletter. You can head straight to our website at www.ywork.com.au. We can't wait to learn about the trouble you've seen in the workplace, and remember, none of the things we've talked about today should be construed as legal advice or any other type of advice. We're just here to talk about all things related to work, and we hope you enjoyed as much as we do. We love it. See you next time.